For the following exercise, solve the quadratic equation by completing the square. Whenever you have a quadratic, and you'll know that you have a quadratic because there's a squared term in your equation, and that's the highest degree variable. At that point, you want to get everything to one side and try to factor. But if the problem won't factor, or if you're just not finding the right combination of factors, then you need to use more advanced methods like completing the square or the quadratic formula. Completing the square, I tend to find students do better with that because humans are just better with processes rather than formulas like the quadratic formula. So let's give that a try here. The setup is to first move your constant to the other side of the equation. So we have 3x squared plus 6x equals 1. And that's a little bit different because with quadratics, when we're factoring, we want everything set to 0. But with completing the square, it's a little bit different. So that's the first step. The next step is to divide both sides of the equation by the leading term coefficient if it happens to exist. So that would give me x squared plus 2x equals 1/3. Now, the next step in the process is the process of actually completing the square. So we're completing this square trinomial here. The way to do that is to take the number that's multiplying x, which is your linear variable. So take that coefficient, which is 2, you divide it by 2, which gives you 1, and square it. So then you add 1 to both sides of the equation. So this quadratic is now a perfect square trinomial. So it's going to factor very easily. It's going to factor into x plus half of this linear variable. So x plus 1, quantity squared. And then 1/3 plus 1 would be 1/3 plus 3/3 or 4/3. Now, the next step in the process, since we have a perfect square on the left-hand side, is to remove that square. So we take the square root of both sides. But because we're taking the square root of a variable that's squared, we need to consider the positive or negative case. So x plus 1 then is equal to the plus or minus square root of 4/3. And what's nice about a square root of a fraction is that you can just do the square root of the numerator and denominator separately. So if anything simplifies, go ahead and do that. Now the last step is to move the plus 1 to the other side. And that's as simple as just subtracting 1 from both sides. So if you subtract 1 here, subtract 1 there, we'll end up with x equals -1 plus or minus. And one last little tidbit is instead of writing 2 over the square root of 3, in fact, what we want to do is rationalize that denominator, which is generally pretty easy. All you have to do is multiply it by whatever that square root is in the denominator over itself. So the rationalized denominator would be 2 root 3 divided by 3. So we have 1 plus or minus 2 root 3 over 3. And there's your answer.